Hi there, I'm here with Darren from Johnson's 1871 and Richard Moore. How are we?
I'm really good, cheers. Thanks so much for inviting me both.
No problem. Good, thanks. Super. Richard, give us a little bit of background of you and tell us a bit about your business.
Yeah, sure. So firstly, nice to be on the show. Thank you, Warren and Darren. So the background on me is I've worked for about 17 years, focused very much on the sales space. My first job was cold calling and selling internet marketing back in 2002, 2003. And I've come all the way through to now running a business that helps coach corporate businesses and sales teams on their sales, but with a very heavy focus now, not just in the face-to-face or phone-based, but also online. And as a result, that's spun into running an agency that helps companies with their content marketing side of things. And as a side fun project, Warren, there's a kind of an initiative I've run called Entrepreneur Business Live, which is networking events, which we've had all over the world, but stopped recently because of the virus, of course.
Yeah, I was looking at your website before you dropped on, say listen to a couple of your podcasts, and
yeah.
Notice you go to some interesting places, Miami to name a few.
It's a hard job. And it's so hard, I wish there were local places like Luton or, somewhere South London, but it's just annoying. Sometimes you've got to go to New York and Miami and that. But in my defense, and they're not just long jollies, and often they are literally flying in and out. I think the New York one was like 56 hours or something like that. So literally in and out and doing it. But we're just trying to get it around the world, because the more we do, the more money goes to charity.
Superb. Sorry, Darren, you were going to ask a question.
I was going to ask. I've followed Richard for a while now, and I've seen a lot of his good content. But there's a lot of social selling at the moment. I think people have actually got a bit of time to do that. What are your kind of like top tips for social selling at the moment?
Yeah, I think everyone has this worry now because life was very easy by the end of last year, wasn't it? And we were totally due a very hard time. 2008 is 12 years ago now. And I do feel that there's this fear now that if the only tool or device people have is social platforms, and let's include, say, LinkedIn in that, there's this fear that everyone has to learn some kind of weird used car salesperson skill set in order to sell. But the top tip really is an ironic one, that you don't sell in a kind of an outward way. It's never going to work in 2020 where you are using content that has a tone of, hey, come buy my stuff. Instead, you need to be doing precisely what you chaps are doing, which is creating a reason for people want to show up and watch essentially your show. And your show may be the form of a podcast or a web series of videos, or it may be that you're writing essentially blog post style each day. You're just sharing opinions. But if you are able to stimulate conversation and draw an audience, what that maps to is leverage of the most powerful thing in persuasion, which is human curiosity. So if you are generating enough curiosity from the right people in an audience, that does map to them saying, hey, let's just check this person out. Who is this person? Now they're on a profile, now they're on a website. And that's the point where you can pivot to helping sell to them. But social selling top tips is all about the front end, about drawing as many people into a stimulating conversation, and to understand the importance of positioning yourself as a relative expert in your niche. So if you talk in a pure signal, keep sending out pure signal about the thing you do, about the ecosystem you work in, without selling overtly, you do find that people self-select and decide to take themselves in your direction. And that can only work if you are stimulating enough with your content that hundreds, if not thousands, of people check you out each day. That sounds absurd, but that's a very real likelihood if you do a good job, and even for beginners on these platforms. And it definitely maps to people saying, you only need a few of them saying, I might as well send this guy a message and see if he could help me out. That's the main thing. All the while, you're having all these other people checking you out. They might stick, then they might, when the time is right, reach out to you or share you to other people. So it's very important to understand there's that longer play. but then we can get into it if you like. But then there's also the more immediate term way in which you can kind of, for want of a better phrase, pick people off as well and close in the moment. But that's a bit more manual through direct messaging.
And how do you see social selling sort of evolving over the years?
I think it's interesting this, because if you look at how sales has evolved and how marketing has evolved, we need to always remember that it's not a static thing. A lot of the theory, the high level theory, does ring true all through the years, but the truth is or people, consumers in any form, they get really conditioned to what they're seeing and hearing. So if you go back, say 4 or 5 years even, this is how crazy it is. The pace goes faster and faster with every year. If you go 3 or 4 years back, you have the type of marketing where it's really kind of clickbaity, and actually people were falling for it back then. And now we're so conditioned to it doesn't really work. A really good display of what I'm talking about here is, I have a 5-year-old daughter, right? When she sees an advert on TV, she wants the product big time, because she's like, all the signals are firing. Of course, when you're conditioned to it and you see it enough, you're like, seriously, are you falling for this kind of thing? And another one, if you look at, adverts from 60 years ago, they're like, buy this thing. And you're like, really? Did that work? But of course it did, because they weren't conditioned to it. And so kind of studying this really gets you to understand that it is evolving. And the big buzzword last year was authenticity. And people had talked a lot about being authentic. I mean, the other buzzword the last 2 to 3 years is about giving value first. And so kind of this give before you ask approach, which businesses have a problem with, because it's not directly transactional. And what it recognizes is that if everyone hates being sold to, but they love to buy, well, then you have to take a slightly longer route to warm people up and make them feel comfortable and a little bit more like they're in control. And what that really looks like is spending time sharing something that might be useful to someone and kind of enticing them in a bit more rather than chasing people. And I think that's evolving more and more. And dare I say, I'm going to coin a term here for the first time on this show. I think we will move to a post-authentic world in the coming year or two. Wow. So you heard it here first. So I believe post-authentic is something that's going to happen because marketers ruin everything, as the saying goes. And I think what's happening here is they recognize that a truthful human representation it draws a crowd. But the thing is, we will get conditioned to them giving the sob story and the misty-eyed, like, I remember when I had a hard time and I went through these hurdles and I eventually got somewhere. We're all starting to get to this point. We're going to start rolling our eyes sooner rather than later. So a post-authentic world will people being literally value-led, just helping someone with no agenda at all, and no trying to upsell or close someone, just literally helping and and becoming a bit of a buyer's market and letting them come to you. So it'll be an interesting development. And honestly, the next 18 months to 2 years, it will be a very interesting way in which we navigate this.
It's interesting you say that, and obviously with the backdrop of COVID and more people undertaking Zoom calls from their homes, which is a very personal space.
Yeah.
So taking these calls, not necessarily in their suited and booted, in casual wear.
Yeah.
We are giving ourselves across a lot more to the audience, and it's interesting you say that that side of the coin is going to really flip. This is probably a pivotal point for that to happen, would you say?
It could be. I mean, a number of years ago, it would look like you guys just didn't make much of an effort today.
Well,
I'm joking. It's a really interesting point because if you go back to 2011, I was working as a sales director in a headhunting company, and we always did video calls. And it was interesting because we wore the suits and that because we felt that that's what was required. But it's interesting that it really will always depend on who you're trying to reach out to. So I've gone to companies in the city and worn a suit because I need to represent a certain ideal for them. But also I've gone to other businesses and I've deliberately dressed down because it represents something else. You've got to think about how you need to be perceived. And arguably people say, oh, you should just be yourself. Kind of no. You get to be yourself if you've earned the right to be yourself in that respect. What I mean by that is Richard Branson because his reputation of precedes him, can sharpen chinos and a shirt. It might be that if you are going to do a job interview on Zoom, then maybe you should suit up a bit. So some consideration there does matter. But I think you're right. I think we're getting used to, again, this is about naturalizing to things, getting very used to seeing each other's homes. If you look at the Gen Z now, who are starting to mature and come into the workforce, they're entering to that early 20s age. They're used, and the truth is you've got to embrace this and be aware of it. They're used to TikTok. And that means like the world is used to seeing everyone's front room, and that's just how it is. And the world's used to most people being on camera, on video. So, again, just consideration of that is hard to cover it all in this very short topic. But the truth is that it will be different for every industry, and to not think about these things it matters. But I think you're right. Being relatable and approachable is often very important, unless you're trying to press home some kind of play where you're framing yourself as an alpha in a particular situation. But again, that's a particular scenario.
Sure. And Richard, you've built up a very strong personal brand over the years. What would your advice be to people right now who are trying to build their own personal brand be?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting one, building this. And a lot of people have asked me now, like, how have you managed to do X, Y, and Z? But what it is a lot of the time is putting a stake in the ground saying I'm going to do this. And consistency is one of the biggest things to have in mind. Consistency doesn't mean showing up every day and doing it every day for like 7 or 8 weeks or even 7 or 8 months. It's literally years. So this week, I was saying to Warren earlier, this week we did, I do a live show every Monday called Startup Business Q&A. It's for an hour. It's 1 p.m. literally every Monday. And we have the 200th week this week. So it's almost 4 years. And people are like, oh, wow, it's amazing you've done 4 years. It's like, it's not amazing. It's like putting trousers on every day. You do it every day. And you could say, wow, for almost 40 years, I've put trousers on, or my mum did it the first year. But, you know, after a while, you're like, wow, that's really cool. Consistency is just about showing up. And I think that is one of the kind of the hallmarks of building a brand. It's not just the flashy logos or making sure you have a brand palette and all that kind of stuff. It actually starts with showing up meaningfully against a particular niche, and as niche as you can be. And again, it's back to this term of sending out a pure signal. So what I want on LinkedIn, because that's my main place at the moment, is for people to associate Richard Moore with understanding and knowing like the advanced level stuff on sales. It's sales. And so the indicator of success is over time, you start seeing people tag you with the context of sales. Richard Moore's one to check out for this. Or you get it a few times a week now I've been doing this for over 2 years or so, every day consistently showing up and sharing stuff on that. You end up with people like writing posts about you and saying, you know, Richard, start talking about this kind of thing and tagging you in it. And that's a representation of what your building brand really maps to. So massive amount of patience is required. And the problem is that the majority of people don't have the stomach for crazy patience. So you have to be building a business and doing a thing in the background. But being known for something takes time, doesn't it? And some people get to hear about you and right away recognize what you do, but others, it takes time. So it's that combination of consistency and distribution. So making sure you're being distributed well. So there's no use just sharing the same things over and over again every day. You've got to make sure enough people are seeing them and spreading that net. That's why you do things like podcasts, you know, because you nibble away at a bit more audience and you keep going. And the key thing to remember is it lasts forever. You don't just hope it will be there in a few months. So it's a massive commitment. So you should want to do it. So you should be doing it against the product or service you want to focus on. Then you'll naturally want to spend time on it each day.
Brilliant. Richard, thanks for your time. Darren, good to see you again.
Thank you very much. Cheers. See you then.
You're welcome. Cheers.